What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Nope. 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 There we go. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? All right. Let me turn this around. Flip the camera? No, mirror. Turn the mirror around. There we go. What's up, everybody? About me. Oh, we're good. We're good. We're chilling. We're in here. We're in here. What's up, y'all? Let's see. Does it sound good? Somebody let me know. Somebody let me know. All right, let's what's up, everybody? What states are we from? What states are we from? What's today? Wednesday? What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Let's see. Let's share that. And then we'll do this. All right, let me get some stuff pulled up. Let me get the comments going. Y'all, I live in the hood. There's some crazy kids doing some stuff outside. Oh, raining. All right. Let's see. YouTube, let me know if it sounds good. Let me know if it sounds good, sounds bad. I did the best I could. I don't know what's going on with the mic. They're just censoring. Because the mic is fine. It's literally a brand new mic. I never use it. I don't use it for anything else. Um, let's talk about Admiralty, and if we venture off into some other stuff, then we venture off into some other stuff. Actually, we may talk about state sovereignty and then Admiralty. Since they like to act like it don't exist, we're going to completely talk about it. Let me see here. What states are we from? What's up, everybody? What states are we from? Time. Let's pull up the Constitution. Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights. What's up, everybody? What states? What states? They said we're not typing anything. All right, let's read some stuff. We read this the other day. Um, they said that the states, there's a difference between the states and their courts and the territories and their courts. So they said there's a difference between territories of the United States and states of the Union, right? They call their territories what territories? The territories of the District of Columbia states. So they call Puerto Rico a state, but we know Puerto Rico is not a state of the Union, right? They call the District of Columbia a state, but we know the District of Columbia is not a state. To them, it can be whatever, but to the union, it cannot be whatever, right? So the Supreme Court of Hawaii said that there's a difference between the states and their courts and territories, their courts. Instead, it's called the state being an independent sovereignty within its sphere makes its own constitution and law. They said there's a difference between the Constitution and there's a difference between what they call laws. So the Constitution, what does a Constitution do? A Constitution just creates the government. It just creates a form of government. Every nation, every country has a constitution. They said that's not like a new term. We didn't invent constitution. They said they've been doing constitutions forever. They said a constitution just creates the government. That's not a brand new concept. But they said there's a specific body of law which the government that is created by a constitution is supposed to be bound by, which all of us are to be bound by. Because law didn't come from government. We understand that law doesn't come from government. Law comes from the lawgiver, right? So when we talk about law, you have to understand the context of law. Law existed before there was such thing as government. So the Supreme Court of Hawaii said there's a difference between the states and their courts and the territories and their courts. They said this thing called the state, being an independent sovereignty within its sphere, makes its own constitution and its own law, and it created its own courts and fixes their jurisdiction. It says while a territory is not an independent sovereignty, they said the Virgin Islands is not an independent sovereignty. They said Guam is not an independent sovereignty. They said the Northern Mariana Islands is not an independent sovereignty. They said Puerto Rico is not an independent sovereignty. So they said a territory being a political dependency under the absolute control and dominion of Congress. Okay, well, Alabama is not under the absolute control and dominion of Congress. Congress has written nothing pertaining to the people of Alabama or the people of Colorado or the people of Arizona. Why? They tell you, because a state is an independent sovereignty. It has its own constitution. Arizona has a constitution. Colorado has a constitution. Wyoming has a constitution, and it has its own laws. They said a territory's organic law is made by Congress and courts, and their jurisdiction and procedure is defined by the same power. Say their courts and our courts. Let's see here. Law book says that the states of the union sustain towards each other the relationship of independent sovereigns. independent foreign states. They said Colorado is nothing like Mississippi. Mississippi is nothing like Oregon. Oregon is nothing like Florida. Why? Because the states of the Union sustain towards each other the relationship of independent sovereigns. How does common law apply? Apply to what? Common law is the law. You apply to the common law. They said the states of the union, they say it twice. They say the states of the union sustain towards each other the relationship of independent sovereign or independent foreign states. The Supreme Court of California said that in all domestic concerns, each state of the union is deemed an independent sovereign. I thought we were the United. Nope, not when you're in one state. All right, let's see here. Believe this is the Supreme Court of New York, but that the people of the states are entitled to all the rights which belong to the King of England. The United States Supreme Court, Illinois will not be allowed replevin claims to be filed. Well, what is a replevin? And who's not allowing it? Who do you think Illinois is? You think Illinois is the government. Oh, that's where you would be. Because if I ask you who the judges of Illinois are, like, bro, but that's not Illinois, and that's not the sovereignty of the state. A corporation can't be sovereign. It says that it will doubtless be urged that within the sphere of their jurisdiction, the states are as independent of the federal government as the government within its sphere is independent of the states. They said one of the reserved powers was that to establish a judicial department. All of the 13 states were in possession of this power and had exercised it at the adoption of the Constitution. And it is not pretended that any grant of it to the general government is found in that instrument. What instrument? The Constitution. They said it is the one of the sovereign powers vested in the states by their constitutions, which remain unaltered and unimpaired, and in respect to which the state is as independent of the general government as that government is independent of the states. They said the general government and the states are separate and distinct sovereignties. acting separately and independently of each other within their respective spheres. The states, within the limits of their powers not granted or in the language of the 10th Amendment, reserved are as independent of the general government. They said the feds and the states are 2 different things, y'all. They said the purpose of the federal government is for federal things, and the purpose of a state constitution and a state government are for state things. And they said, all of this 13 states were in possession of this power. What power? The independent sovereignty of its own state. Sovereign is an action. Sovereign is a verb. Like people say, where do you go to church? It's not possible to go to church. People say you go to court. A court is not a building. What is a court? A court is the person and suit of the sovereign. Who is the sovereign? The injured party who would go and impanel a jury and a grand jury. Sovereign is an action. Only a people can be sovereign. Like they said, well, what is a state? A state is not the 3 branches of government. They said a government can't be sovereign. Who's sovereign? The people are sovereign. How are the people sovereign? A grand jury, a trial by jury, an injured party. And each of the, Bill of Rights that are there existed before there was such thing as a federal constitution. They said the Supreme Court said, "In our country, the people are sovereign. The government cannot sever its relationship by taking away their nationality." They said the Constitution governs us. Us, them being the Supreme Court, is the us. They said the Constitution limits the government. The Constitution grants Congress no express power to strip away nationality. What's your nationality? One of the 50 states. Absolutely, I'm self-governed. Well, I'm not self-governed. I'm governed by God. I do what He tells me to do through His written word, through His people, and through His Spirit, and that controls every action of my life. So if the government says something is wrong, and that I broke the law and it doesn't go against God's law, well, then I've broken no law. The law existed before there was such thing as government. The first 10 books of the Bible, they didn't have government, but they had law. See, I don't answer to government for nothing, and I'll say it to their face, I've said it to their face. I don't answer to the government. I answer to Yahweh, and my actions dictate that, and I'll suffer the consequences of those actions. and that's okay. I'll be okay with that because the government didn't create, right? I don't owe anything to them because they've given me nothing. They didn't give me the law. The law existed and it was fulfilled in Christ. So that's where my allegiance lies, no matter where I'm at or who I'm around or who claims to be in charge. Oh, that's why don't nobody watch it because we don't want the law. We want the government. That's what we want. That's what they got in the well, there's no such thing as American common law. Common law comes from England, and you study the common law of England, they say they got it from Moses. Okay, well, you go study Moses. He said he got it from somebody. He didn't come up with he said he was on a mountain one time and the voice told him the law. The same way the voice told Adam the law, and the voice told Noah the law, and the voice told Enoch the law, and the voice told Abraham the law. So you can call it whatever, but Christ said all of the law and the prophets are concerning me. The apostle Paul said the law is a tutor. He actually says it's a schoolmaster to lead you to Christ. He said it's the master that leads you to the master. The law's invisible. And if you don't obey it, then it's not your friend. It don't help you when you disobey, or when you ignore it, or when you disregard it, or when you thought you knew it and you didn't really know it. See, an action of a replevin is an equity writ given to a corporation. That's not the law. This thing said Massachusetts then on becoming was actually a nation as France. Then on becoming independent, Massachusetts was as a nation as France and possessed the same will of absoluteness, as well as supremacy, exclusiveness of control over her and her citizens. They said that it is necessary that a provincial convention be called by this conference for the express purpose of forming new government in this province on the authority of the people only. And with one dissenting a voice, they agreed. They said, "Who is Massachusetts?" "Oh, it's the people." They said, "Who is Pennsylvania?" "Oh, it's the people." They said they said, "When we start this government in 1776, we want you to know, friends and countrymen, in obedience to the power that we derive from you, form a government of the province of Pennsylvania under the authority of the people." They said, "By sovereignty, I do not mean government." They said, "But the right of absolute control in all things, including the right to establish governments and government agencies." They said the word sovereignty has but one meaning, that of supreme and uncontrollable authority. Hence, it cannot be predicated on so-called government. They say you can't even relate the word sovereignty to this thing called government. It's not possible. They say, hence, it cannot be predicated on so-called government or powers of government in a republic. What's a republic? They said these must always be subject to the organized people, the commonwealth. They said, as sovereignty in a republic, it necessarily includes the right to establish, amend, and abolish governments. It is simply absurd to say that a government in a republic is sovereign. It's just not possible. They said the system, therefore, is to be created as the offspring of the mind and will of the people, whom God has commissioned to govern themselves, and is to be regarded as the most sacred of earthly things, like the Ark of the Covenant. No, they can harm, injure, damage, and cause loss when their rights are being taken away from them. Read the Declaration of Independence, they'll tell you that. They said they have the right to alter or to abolish government. The Constitution of Texas says that the people of Texas have the right to alter or to abolish government, not to each other, but to the thing that thinks it's sovereign when it really isn't. They say of New York, they said every true son of New York will defend and ought to defend to the death. They said no authority can, on any pretense whatsoever, be exercised over the people of this state, but as is or shall be derived or granted by the people of this state. And that's the New York Constitution, Article 1, Section 1. So y'all want paperwork. They said, no, we got another solution. Y'all just not unified. The United States Supreme Court said that the country is a political union. Well, they said the American states are a political union. It is true that these states are said to be all sovereign and independent. It is declared by the Articles of Confederation. They said a state court may exercise personal jurisdiction as long as the minimum. But they said the framers also intended that the states retain many essential attributes of sovereignty. The sovereignty of each state implies a limitation on the sovereignty of the other states. They said this is the original scheme of the Constitution. Why are you in court? There's no such thing as a status. Status is a fiction. What they do say is a fugazi. It don't exist. There are people who are alive and there are people who are not alive. See, this thing called sovereignty comes with great humility. Mm. If you end up in court over traffic offenses, that is not evidence of sovereignty. Sovereignty means you can't end up in there unless there's an injured party or unless you were the injured party. How did they know who you were? Sovereignty. It looked like they didn't recognize your status of sovereignty if they could bring you in. Look like somebody under a contract. If they can bring you in there over traffic offenses, they can bring you in there over anything. How does a case get created? Yeah, let's talk about sovereignty. You want to talk about sovereignty? They say sovereignty, you can't go into court unless you consent it. Oh yeah. We'll talk about that one. I know it ain't no status because there's people that can't get up in there because they're unrecognizable because they don't have no corporate fiction to subject them to the courts. How'd they know who you were? What they say? It was Alabama. Let me go to Alabama. Alabama said, "Oh yeah, when you participate in commerce, you remove sovereignty." Ooh, that's nasty. Yeah, Alabama thought they were sovereign and then they ended up in court. They said, "Hold on, how we end up in here?" Yeah, because you waived it. That's called sovereign immunity. That's a common law doctrine. Where's it at? No, no, no. Jurisdiction. It's probably a jurisdiction. Mhm. Again, there's people who can't go into court, and people who have to go into court. Where's it at? Jurisdiction, jurisdiction. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. Dang it. Now, you never find it when you need it. They were talking about Alabama. They said Alabama thought they didn't have to go to court over this issue. Here it is. Boom. Yeah, here it is. All right. They said somebody engaged in interstate commerce by state constituted a waiver of its sovereign immunity and consent to a lawsuit in federal court. They said the statute provides that every common carrier engaged in commerce between the several states shall be liable in damages to any person suffering energy injury while he is employed by such carrier in such commerce, and they may be brought into the district court of the United States. Alabama said, no, 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 no. A state can't be sued without by an individual without his consent. They said, no, no, no. Since the people are citizens of Alabama, this court recognized that an unconsenting state is immune from federal court suits brought by its own citizens as well by people of another state. But they said immunity can be waived. They said the state's freedom from lawsuits without its consent does not protect it from a lawsuit to which it has consented. They said there's a difference between people who get brought into court and people who cannot be brought into court, and that issue, consent. They said that is the definition of sovereignty. They said you're immune. This so-called sovereign immunity you think you have can be waived in a commercial contract. They said the state's freedom from lawsuits without its consent does not protect it when you consented. They said Alabama has consented to the lawsuit. The state's immunity from a lawsuit without its consent is rooted in the inherent nature of sovereignty. But the state surrendered a portion of their sovereignty when the Fed started regulating Congress. When they started regulating commerce. They said the states surrendered a portion of their sovereignty when they granted Congress the power to regulate commerce. And then when Alabama started participating in commerce, it consented to such suits as authorized by the statute. They say it again. They say Alabama consented. So Alabama doesn't have sovereignty when it participates in commercial action. Who's the real Alabama? If you're from Alabama, you're the Alabama. So you say alleged traffic, no, they can't write, they can't even create a ticket if they don't know who you are. They said that's the evidence of sovereignty. People who end up in court, and people who cannot be ended up in court. They said by engaging in interstate commerce, the state has subjected itself to commercial power and is liable for a violation of an act, as are other people who participate in commerce. They said when the state, who's an independent sovereignty, you heard me read it, right? The states are independent and sovereign. They say, yeah, 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 that sounds real cool until we find a contract that is related to commerce. And then they don't want to hear nothing about no, oh, sovereign, we're sovereign. We saw how many times you hear people they call them sovereign citizens. Right. Well, you wouldn't be in there if you were, I ain't ready for this stuff, man. They said by engaging in commerce. What's engaging in commerce? I went to the DMV and I asked for a state ID. I went to the DMV, I asked for a driver's license. When I purchased a car, I didn't know what purchasing a car entails. I don't have proof of ownership of a car, but magically the stuff about my car is on the cop's computer. They said it's the difference between people who show up on the computer and people who do not show up on the computer. Yeah, there's 2 things you won't argue with me about, and that is consent and jurisdiction. Because when you don't have it, they'll call supervisors, "Hey, hey, the guy ain't showing up on the computer. Ask him what his social security number is. Ask him what his zip code is. Ask him, why isn't it where he get his car from?" Because those people are on the computer. They don't know what to do. They know exactly what to do when you're on the computer. They say, "Yep, mhm, go find it in court. We don't care." "Oh, no, we're towing it. Thank you. Yep, go ahead and step out the car." "Oh, you don't wanna step out the car? Okay." They start busting out windows, all type of stuff. Why? Because you showed up on the computer. What do you mean you're sovereign and you got a sovereign status? Yeah, they said we didn't see none of that on the computer. So we don't believe you. Get out the car. You see the videos. You don't have to believe me. Go watch the videos on YouTube. They be dogging on people on YouTube. Get out the car, beating the mess out of them. My rights. No, not when you consent. Yeah, that's why I ain't got no friends on that. Ain't nobody commenting now. I know how to shrink a crowd. Yeah, I'm not here because y'all pay me. Y'all don't pay me no money for this stuff. By engaging in interstate commerce, you subject yourself to commercial power. People tell me all the time, the United States is a corporation. The court, the judge is a banker. The judge is a bank. Okay, well, if you ended up in front of him where there was no injured party, it's because they know who you are. How they know who you are? Well, the birth certificate. No, not the birth certificate. You went to the DMV. You went to the car dealership. That word dealership is an admiralty term. Actually, I have this. What is a deal? A deal. Every time we use their language, we don't even know it. They create a whole language and we just speak it every day. We speak it blindly. A deal. A deal in nautical and woodworking context refers to the plank of timber, specifically softwood from pine or spruce. Historically, this durable wood was a maritime commodity used to construct various parts of the ship. They said, "You want a deal?" That deal to help you stay in commerce. Why don't you go to the dealer? See, what's so special about those Amish people? They don't have none of that stuff. They don't have passports, they don't have no state ID, they don't have no driver's licenses, and they don't have no cars. They work for themselves, and they don't go around hollering, "I'm sovereign, I'm sovereign." They know my status. We don't even know if you don't live in the Northeast, you don't even know they exist. So ask yourself, can you take care of yourself if there's no electricity? Can you take care of yourself without a refrigerator or a washer machine? Can you build a log cabin if a natural disaster comes and wipes out your house? Because the Amish can throw up a house in 3 days because they got this thing called community, and they don't go work for other people. They go work for themselves. So let's stop using that word sovereign until we're actually that. And when you're actually that, you're humble enough not to tell nobody. If I never would have seen Amish people with my own eyes, I wouldn't have known they existed. I hear people complain all the time, "How do the Amish not get to pay tax?" Okay, good. They mind their business. They don't participate in commerce. They said when a state leaves its sphere that is exclusively its own and enters into activities subject to congressional regulation, it subjects itself to that regulation as fully as if it were a private person or corporation. I'm not a person, I'm a living man on the land. Mhm. Right, right, right. Well, how you show up on the computer? That's what I don't get. A living man on the land, you should be in the woods. When I worked in the oil field, I didn't know those Amish people exist because until we went into the woods, we in the oil field, we be in the woods working. We be in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden, I seen 2 ladies carrying. I said, "Well, who what is that?" Oh, he said, "Yeah, that's the Amish." "What do you mean Amish people? What do you mean they are real?" He said, "Yeah, they real." He said, "They built all these houses." "Them houses?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "How'd they do that?" He said, "They got like 60 of them. They'll build a house in a weekend for you." "What?" He said, "Yeah, they'll throw a house up for you in a weekend with no electricity." And this is in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. I said, "Not in the winter." He said, "Yeah, them houses been there forever. What are you talking about? They last all winter. They last every winter." He said, "Yeah, they'll do little tree houses for your kids and stuff. They make their own soaps and grow their own food," and he said, "They don't have banks." I said, "What?" They don't go bragging about it. They don't have nobody to tell, but they don't go around telling people this stuff. They don't go around saying, "I'm sovereign." No, they mind their business. If you wasn't deep in the woods where they was at, you'd never see them. If you're not from Pennsylvania, if you're not from Ohio, you're not from West Virginia, you would never see them. You don't have them in California, not that I know of. But that's what sovereignty look like. You know the Amish people can get into Canada with no passports? None, 0. They go to Canada every day. They got folks on the other side that'll let them in. They got relationships. They built them relationships over time, and now they get into Canada every I guess whenever they want without passports. So let's not start calling ourselves sovereign until we can demonstrate it. Until it blows your mind like when I saw those them Amish people, that blew my mind. They look like Little House on the Prairie. That look like, I used to watch a show when I was a kid with my grandma called Bonanza. That look like They look like Bonanza. That's them, Billy Joe, Little Joe. Yeah, that's them. That's what they look like today in 2026. So we don't wanna hear nothing about your little negotiable instruments, your commercial paperwork. That's not what sovereignty is. They say when you play with commerce, you remove sovereignty. But you said the states are sovereign. They are. That's you see what they like in Ohio, Pennsylvania. It ain't a lot of them. They in New York too. I went winter before last, I was in New York. They said, "Yeah, they'll build a two-story house for you in about a month." He said one of his homeboys is having a house built by him. I said, "Somebody lied to us, right?" So don't say you sovereign if you be in their courts all the time. You got more reading to do. What's up, everybody? What states are we from? I'm not mad. What's that dude say? I'm marvelous. I'm marvelous. Y'all are moving. Who wants some books? Who wants some books? Who wants some books? I got a lot of books. What states are we from? What states are we from? Let me see. I was gonna read something else. Let me see. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Here's the opposite. Oh, Kansas is in the house. Colorado, Mississippi's in the house. Let's go. Let's go. See, we don't talk about the Fed. We talk about the states. We don't know no feds. Let me read this one. Let me finish this little jurisdiction thing. They said this guy objected to the proceedings on the ground that there was no jurisdiction. This is how you know you don't have jurisdiction. Because sometimes they don't really have jurisdiction and they behave a certain way anyway. And then when it comes time for proof, they can't actually prove it, right? So this is the story of that. This is the Supreme Court of California case. They say this guy said that, hey, y'all don't have jurisdiction. And he said, the reason we're challenging is because there was no jurisdiction. He said one ground as to the jurisdiction was there was not a license, and he had not claimed to have ever had a license. They said that we think it is clear that neither the officers nor any officer acquired any jurisdiction of the petitioner to consider the make of any order, and that the order is null and void. Why? They said because the petitioner was not licensed at the time of the proceeding. They said, how'd you create this case? And when it's time for them to prove how they created the case, they gonna say, oh well. No, no, no. Either he was on the computer or he wasn't on the computer. They said that dude said, well, I wasn't on the computer. I don't know how they created this case. He didn't have no license. They said, this, of course, is because the petitioner was not licensed at the time of the proceeding, which the precedent necessity before any action is authorized. They said the judgment of this court is reversed and declared the order is declared null and void for a lack of a jurisdiction. See, there's a difference when you didn't have a license and they created a fake case, and there's a difference when you were on the computer and they created a case. Somebody said I'm going Amish. That's what we all supposed to be doing. We don't have to call it Amish though. We can just say, "Oh, I'm just being Colorado. I'm just being a New Yorker. I'm just being a Californian. I'm just being a Texan." Right? We're not obligated. There's no law that tells us we have to participate in this. We can leave it all behind, but you gotta have some skills. See, those Amish people never left their skills. See, over the time, over the years, over the generations now, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents said, "Oh, I want convenience," instead of passing down useful and life skills. They said, "Oh, well, we no longer find value in the hard work, in the labor, and now we've become a nation of ease and convenience, and now we're so dependent on the system that if it crashes tomorrow, we're all in trouble." Me too, I'm not special. I'm saying there's some skills I ain't got either. I don't know if I can live without air conditioner, y'all. Like, I'm just gonna be for real, bro. They got me. They got me. I don't know if I can live without well, I can live without Wi-Fi. I don't know if I can live without a refrigerator. You know what I mean? Those are the conveniences that okay, well, I've never known a life outside of a refrigerator, bro. You know, to them, it's only been 100 years since they had a refrigerator. They said in 1923 they introduced the refrigerator. Only 100 years. They said 100 years ago they knew how to preserve food without a refrigerator and a freezer. They said they didn't have none of that stuff. Um, I forgot what I was talking about. Um, oh, I asked y'all what state you're from. Mississippi, Colorado, Kansas. Let's go. I do some more homework on Kansas. Let's see what I got on Kansas. Kansas taught us what the definition of the common law is. Supreme Court of Kansas. Kansas, Kansas, Kansas. Kansas. Is it cold there right now? Mm-mm, I can't. They say houses cheap in Kansas, y'all. They say you can get a house for like 40 grand. Nobody wanna live there 'cause they be having crazy tornadoes. All right, the Supreme Court of Kansas said that the common law is defined as the body of law which derives from judicial decisions rather than statutes. They said common law is defined as judicial decisions rather than statutes. See, they want you to think this is I'm sorry, this is they want you to think that a judicial decision is what the guy in the black robe does. They don't wanna tell you that when the jury is impaneled, they're judges and they make decisions, and that would be the definition of the common law. Oh, this common law, oh, it's case law. No, it ain't case law. It's a judicial decision. That means every time a jury is impaneled and they make the decision of guilty or not guilty, or they determine the law and the facts, then that is a judicial decision. Why? Because the judges at common law were the jury. You look at every law dictionary says that in the definition of a judge, they got jurors. They're the judges. So that would be a common law judicial decision. The Supreme Court of Kansas said that false imprisonment is the wrongful interference of personal liberty of the individual. They said this wrong may be committed by just words. Do you know why I pulled you over? Yep, that's false imprisonment right there. They said any injury done to the individual. They said false imprisonment is any injury done to the individual's person or his character or reputation under the color of a legal or judicial proceeding. They said all that is necessary is that the individual be restrained of his liberty without any sufficient legal cause, therefore, and by the words or acts which he fears to disregard. Supreme Court of Kansas. They said the government of the United States has no inherent powers of sovereignty. They said the states are sovereign and independent, and the relations between the states are like the nature of international law. They said when Kansas and Colorado beef with each other, they said that's like when 2 different nations are going at it. They said that's like when France and Germany going at it. They said that's like when Egypt and Ethiopia going at it. They said Kansas has its own sovereignty. They said Colorado was erected into one of the states of the union and became a political sovereignty. Colorado, and Kansas is a sovereign state of the union. And they said that Kansas and Colorado are states sovereign and independent. Come on now. So what's the Kansas nationality? You're a Kansan, I think. That's what y'all call yourselves. I don't know. They said the language of the 10th Amendment means the sovereignty of the people. That's nasty. That's nasty. All right, who else? Somebody said Mississippi. Mississippi. Who else? What other states? Call these attorneys, ask them why they lying. Do that. You get in trouble. Don't do it. Mississippi. Police power in Mississippi. They said there is no necessity that the rights of the individual shall yield to the rights of the public. They said this thing called police power cannot rise above the Mississippi Constitution, and it cannot justify an enactment of such law which amounts to arbitrary and unwarranted interference with the rights of the people. which are guaranteed by the Mississippi Constitution. Mississippi nasty, y'all. What's the law of Mississippi? They said the common law of England brought over by the colonists as part of their heritage is the law of this state. What's the law of Mississippi? Common law of England, baby. Baby. They said the territorial government of Mississippi was established by an act passed in 1798, and in 1817, the United States Congress authorized state government of Mississippi. When the Mississippi Territory was organized, the ordinance secured the inhabitants in the enjoyment of judicial proceedings according to the course of common law. They said the right to a trial by jury in the 1890 Constitution applies in the common law of this state. They said the common law is not now, never has been, and never will be static or stagnant. That's your responsibility to make sure that happens, because I know they ignore it every day. They say, yeah, yeah, yeah. You showed up on the computer, get these handcuffs. The Supreme Court of Mississippi said that an officer at common law was not authorized to make an arrest without a warrant for a mere misdemeanor. Do it every day, don't they? The Supreme Court of Mississippi said by the common law of England, a civil officer or a private citizen has the right without a warrant to make an arrest for a crime not committed in their presence. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Mississippi. Ooh. Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble real quick. We gonna hit Mississippi. We gonna leave. Watch this. Watch this. They said this guy in Mississippi was a plumber. Mississippi. This guy in Mississippi was a plumber. He was engaged in making a living by working at his trade from day to day, taking such contracts and doing such work in his line as he found to do. We cannot assent to the proposition that the intention of the legislator was to impose so large an occupation tax upon his land. Gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. I can't read the whole case. I can't read it. Uh, Washington. Let's go to Washington. They'll shut down my live. You think I'm playing? I've done it before. What's the law of Washington State? The Supreme Court of Washington said the common law, including the English statutes enforced at the date of the Declaration of Independence, continues to be the law of this state. They don't talk about it. People tell me all the time, brother, I went to court. They act like they never heard of the That's why when people ain't your friend, they say, "We don't do no common law here." They deny on both ends. They say they don't do the common law, and they say they don't do penalty. I'm like, somebody lying. They say we don't do the common law. That's they don't do that no more. That's old. Oh well, no, we don't do admiralty law because that has to do with ships and all of that. Oh, okay. They say they do statutory law. Okay. Statutory law means what's a statute? A statute is the customs and bylaws of a corporation. Okay, a corporation is 100% under commercial law. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear commercial law, and it's called an admiralty court. The Supreme Court of Washington said the common law of England continues to be the law of this They didn't say that in 1856. They said that in the 60s. They said the common law in another case shall be the rule of decision in all. They said the Washington Territory incorporated the English common law in 1881 and upon statehood became the law of the state. What's the law of Washington state? If there was no other states but Washington, what's the law? Common law. If all the other states fell and they just got Washington left, we gotta go to Washington. Why? 'Cause that's where the common law of England gonna be at. The Supreme Court of Washington said this thing called the code that they put on the citations and hand y'all out, they said that thing is not the law. The Supreme Court of Washington State said the revised code of Washington is not the law. I mean, it's not the law. That's all they do. They talk about codes all day. Yeah, that's not the law. Look, look, look. This is nasty. The Supreme Court of Washington said that lawful money is only gold and silver coin in Washington State. Oh, no. We just read that the states are sovereign, right? I'm not crazy. I'm not tripping. I read it from the federal cases. I read it from the state cases. They said the states are sovereign. Okay, well, that means the Supreme Court of Hawaii told us tonight. Okay, well, they make their own states. They make their own constitutions. They make their own laws. They make their own courts. And they said in Washington, only gold and silver coin is considered lawful money. Why? Because that common law, that's what money was. Oh, this is nasty. What else? Somebody said Colorado. Colorado. What's the law of Colorado? So you guys see your state like nobody, like it's no other state. For real, you don't. There's very few people who travel to different states every day. Your state is a nation. They said the common law of England is in full force in Colorado. They said all trials for criminal offenses shall be conducted according to the course of common law. Okay, in common law, there's no such thing as a crime where there's no injured party. The Supreme Court of Colorado said the will of the people of Colorado is sovereign. They said in 1861, Colorado adopted the common law of England and all acts and statutes of British Parliament in aid of the common law prior to the fourth year of James I. What does that mean? Because people will misconstrue that and think that they can just do everything like they did in England. No, 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 no. Only the things that would protect people's rights is what they adopted. So they say down to the fourth year of James the First, which was in 1607. They said the Supreme Court of Colorado said that the original 13 states took the common law by inheritance and so held it at the time of the adoption of their constitutions. They said we took it as a territory before they became a state by legislative enactment and then held it until the time of the adoption of our constitution, the Colorado Constitution. They said, yada, yada, yada. They said this is a constitutional court with common law powers and that the common law is in force. And they said there has been no change in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court at the adoption of the Constitution. Nasty. What website are you to? Oh, this is my website. This is Patreon. Do I have an ebook on the states? No, I don't. Maybe one day. Maybe if enough people join the Patreon, I can afford to do it. They said the business of selling water, some dude in Colorado got selling. They said the business of selling water is entirely lawful and not to be banned under the law requiring restrictions. They said under all under like conditions should be free to engage in this pursuit. The right to pursue a lawful calling is a natural right. And they say if the legislator exceeds this power, the enactments of that subject are void. See, I got a bunch of cases on Colorado from the Colorado Supreme Court because all these cases, somebody's trying to do something, and then they'll write a fake statute to try to restrict the right of the thing, and they can't do that. And so when it makes it up to the Supreme Court said multiple times, they said, this is all concerning labor. They say somebody is engaged in a lawful business, somebody's engaged in a lawful business, and you cannot. They said, I keep getting in trouble. He may not be uh, because he may not be a taxpayer or own or control a building for that purpose, the statute that you try to write to restrict that right is void. We putting that stuff in these books. They say again on these cases, okay, well, this ordinance that y'all passed as a city or a county or whatever is in violation of the Colorado Constitution, and it is void. New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey. Oh, something new about New Jersey. Watch this. Um, the history of New Jersey. Guess what? Okay, I think this is French or Latin. I don't know. But New Jersey used to be called, not used to be called. I don't know what it was called New Jersey. But they said when they founded New Jersey as a colony, they called it Nova Caesarea, and that is translated into New Jersey. Nova Caesarea or Caesarea. They say it 2 different ways, or New Jersey. So I got this book on the history of New Jersey, and they say they called it they got both. They say Nova Caesarea or New Jersey. I said, "Okay, I see y'all." Okay, in this book on the history of New Jersey, they say, uh, it's Old English, so give me a little second. They said establishing fees by any other power or authority than by the governor, council, or representatives, we take to be great grievance. What are fees? You know what fees are. We just got talking about it. We almost got in trouble over them. All right, they used to call them fees. They still are fees. They're fake fees. They said by establishing fees, we take to be a great grievance, and it is directly repugnant to the Magna Carta. They said you are to take care that no man's life, member, freehold, or goods be taken away or harmed in our province under your government otherwise than by established and known laws, not repugnant to, but as near as much as may be agreeable to the laws of England. That's common law. See, then they knew there was a difference between what came out of Parliament pertaining to the crown, which was a corporation under the king, and the laws of England. which would be of the people. So there were statutes pertaining to Britain, this fiction, corporate fiction, right? And then there would be the laws of England, which would be the law of, and I knew that stuff back. They said as of the fourth day of October, 1776, New Jersey was completely a sovereign and independent state. They keep saying this stuff. They use that exact phrase. They said someone born in New Jersey before the year 1775 and was there until 1777 had a right to take lands by descent of their parents in what is now known the state New Jersey. Uh, Here we go. They said the Supreme Court of New Jersey said the Commonwealth of England has a constitutional basis in our jurisprudence. What's our jurisprudence? Jurisprudence is the consciousness of the law. That's how they, because law is invisible. They can't write it down. They think they want you to believe they can write it down. They can't write it down. So jurisprudence is a consciousness. It's just a thought, right? That's what the kids say today. It's a flow state. It's just invisible, and you should just know. Don't put your hands on me. I won't put my hands on you. Don't damage my property. I won't damage your property. Don't take something that doesn't belong to you. I won't take something that doesn't belong to you. Right? They said this is the jurisprudence. They said this thing called the common law of England has a constitutional basis in our jurisprudence. And it's been that way since the Constitution of 1776. Remember, New Jersey is one of the original 13, y'all. This case was in the 50s. They said nothing changed from the 1950s until or since 1776. They said we're not even talking about the United States Constitution here. They said we're talking about New Jersey. They say it like New Jersey is its own thing. We just read it. They are. They're sovereign and independent. No, but I thought they were united. They're united. There's an international representation in the District of Columbia. But we don't live in the District of Columbia. We don't work for the District of Columbia. So they said when we in New Jersey, we talk about New Jersey. I don't care what's going on in New York. We don't care what's going on in Pennsylvania. We don't care what's going on in Colorado. They said we care about what's going on in New Jersey. Right? They said the common law of England is our jurisprudence. They said the common law of England still remain in force. They say it twice. Common law shall remain in force. They say in the same case that confirming from this common law of England that the ultimate sovereignty is in the people, from whom springs all legitimate authority. From the first, the colonists in America claimed the benefit and protection of the common law. It was the source of immense moral power to the colonists that they were able to show that the rights they claimed were conferred by the common law. And they said the colonists, upon their immigration from the mother country, brought with them to this state. They said, we don't care about nobody else. They brought with them to New Jersey the common law of England. There you go. What else? What other states? Indianapolis. Somebody said Indianapolis. Let's go to Indiana. Let's go to Indiana. Actually, I don't have nothing about the common law in Indiana, but uh I do have they said that the people of In this is when Indiana joined the Union. They joined the Union in 1860, and the Fed said that the people of Indiana, the United States citizen residing in Indiana, there's no such thing as that. They said the people of Indiana form a constitution and a state government. They said it again. They said they form for themselves. The people of Indiana form for themselves. They said we weren't there. We didn't tell them what to do. They said the people of Indiana did this in Indiana. They said they formed for themselves a constitution and state governments and state government, and we found it to be Republican in its form. They said the principles of the Articles of Compact between the original states and the people and in the Northwest Territory of the Ohio River. They said Indiana shall be one and is hereby declared to be one of the United States of America and is admitted into the Union on equal footing with the original states in all respects whatsoever. See, they never can say, and you won't ever find a piece of paper that created the feds are not a creator. The Constitution says it. They never say in the Constitution they have the power to create states. They don't have the power to create states. States form themselves. You understand that? States form themselves. So the feds can never say, "Oh, well, we created." They'll say it. They'll say it on the internet. You can Google it. They'll say, "We granted was granted statehood." There's no such thing as granted statehood. You may admit them into a union of other states, but you didn't grant Indiana statehood. You said it yourself. The people of Indiana form for themselves a constitution and a state government. You know how nasty this is? Because they want you to believe that the feds have more power than they actually do, and they don't have that power. They have the power in the Constitution to admit a new state that's already been created. It never tells them they have the power to create states. Watch Article 4, the states, right? They say full faith and credit shall be given to each state in the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Then it says in section 2, that's not or section 3, new states may be admitted. You say they created new states. They said it may be admitted by Congress. Congress does admitting. They don't do creating. Does that make sense? So who created Indiana? The people of Indiana created Indiana. Like we got to get this. Like real people went to Indiana and said, "We're gonna call it Indiana." We don't get it. We don't get it. We got to get it. They said these people did this stuff themselves. They formed a constitution and a state government, and they're admitted into this thing called the United States of America, which is just the name of the union. It's just the name of the 50 states together. It's not the name of the government. The name of the government is called the United States. That's that's something different. So Indiana said in their constitution that all criminal prosecutions shall have the right to a trial by jury, an impartial jury, and to be heard by himself and to demand the nature and cause of the accusation against him. See, the states that came after the original 13, there's a deception that they'll tell you, these attorneys, all these people, they'll say, "Oh, well, the state constitutions are like the federal constitution." No, there was 13 states in 1776 already. Virginia already had a Bill of Rights in 1776. They already had a constitution in 1776. The federal constitution didn't get established until 1787, 13 years later, y'all. And that on the 13th year, they got the states to come and create this federal. They said, "Uh-huh, yep, put that in there. Yep, yep, because we already got that, so go ahead and put that in there. Yep, we already got that. Yeah, Georgia's got that. Yep, Massachusetts, you got that already? Yep, put that in there." Yep, Delaware, what you wanna yeah, you already got that? Okay, yeah, they got it in there. They say we the Constitution, what we call the Constitution is based on the original 13 states constitution. They said this thing called the Constitution is not a brand new idea. They said, "Oh, we'll create this thing called the Constitution." No, we already had constitutions. We just read it all night. The states are sovereign and independent. They already had constitutions. I said it earlier, that there's a constitution in every country. Everybody's got a constitution. That wasn't a new concept. I said it a couple nights ago. We're not the only United States. Mexico is called the United States of Mexico. Did y'all know that? They have their own states in Mexico today. Today, it's called the United States of Mexico. They got their own flags, everything. Oh, they're gonna cut my head off. Brazil, they're called the United States. I think Russia is called the United States. Yeah, this thing called the United States is not a new concept. We're not we really should stop calling ourselves the United States, which I guess we never do. But we're not the only US. It's literally called the United States of Mexico. Google it right now. Get off the live, go Google it. It's called the United States of Mexico. The Yucatan is the name of a state, which is a nation of people. Just like New Jersey is a nation of people. Just like Indiana is a nation of people. The Supreme Court, the Indiana Constitution says that in all criminal cases, the jury shall have the right to determine the law and the facts. They said that in all civil cases, the right to a trial by jury shall remain inviolate. The Supreme Court of Indiana said that you are the exclusive judges of the law. They say you're exclusive judges of the evidence and determine the law. Remember we talked about what the common law was, and it's a body of judicial decisions? Okay, that's how it gets done. It's called the jury. They say you are the exclusive judges of the evidence and determine the law. Who determines the law in Indiana, y'all? The Supreme Court of Indiana said at common law, the jury in criminal cases are the judges of the law of the case. And an attorney can explain that away. They'll say, "Oh, what that really means is" no, it's pretty plain. You don't need that dictionary. They say they the judges of the law. That's what it means. The Supreme Court of Indiana said the common law of England, as it existed in 1607, may define and may state and define many attributes and powers of sovereignty which are applicable to this republic. They called themselves a republic. They said to this republic and to our several states. They said the source of all governmental power in this state is the people. They said any sovereign prerogatives this state may have come from the sovereign power of they said now this is nasty. So they're talking about this common law of England thing, right? They said that the source of all government power is the people, the sovereign prerogatives this state may have come from the sovereign power of the people. Now watch this. They said under our constitution we have no king. What constitution? The Indiana Constitution. They're talking about the King of England. They said the king, therefore, and the prerogatives that were personal to him being repugnant to our Constitution are abrogated, but his sovereign powers and functions and duties now devolve upon the people of the state. They said the sovereignty that the King of Great Britain had is now the people of Indiana. I'm telling you, 1,000 years from now, somebody's gonna find our law books and say, "People were kings." But in our day, we're looking like, "Man, these people mistreating the crap out of us." They said, "A trial by jury is not a trial by judicial officers." They said, "The jurors act for the body, the people." Ooh, they got a Latin phrase. It's called the people of the county. It's called pro corpore comitatus. I don't know how to say it. They say in this country, the sovereign is the people. It is clear from the early history of juries were considered to be merely members of the community, representative of the people, as distinguished from office holders. What did they tell you? Oh, well, you got representatives in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. No, they said the jury represents the people. They said a trial by jury is considered a trial by the people as distinguished from a trial by a judicial officer. Do I have anything on North Carolina? Just a little bit, just a little. They got this guy named Sir Walter Raleigh from the year 1584. And he said that the said statutes, laws, and ordinances are to be and are not to be against true Christian faith. Sir Walter Raleigh is who they named Raleigh, North Carolina. The Supreme Court of North Carolina said that every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. They said you stand in front of a bus while that bus is going 45 miles per hour, you are not exempt from the laws of nature. They said that he is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent. What does that look like today? They look like the Amish people. They look like they not bound by any institutions formed by their fellow men without their consent. The Supreme Court of North Carolina said that false imprisonment is the unlawful and total restraint of liberty of the person. The right violated by this tort is the freedom of locomotion. They said one who interferes with the freedom of locomotion of another does so at his peril. They said it has always been the rule of the common law that an arrest should not be made without a warrant. An arrest without a warrant was deemed unlawful. This is the Supreme Court of North Carolina. They said that the foundation principle of the common law is of ancient origin. It derives from assurances of the Magna Carta. They said that no man should be taken into custody of the law without the sanction of a warrant or other judicial authority. These exceptions related in the main to cases involving felonies and suspected felonies and to breaches of the peace. felonies. You study that word felony, it always means damaged or stolen property. And then breaches of the peace always meant violence. So if there was no injured party, you could not be taken into custody. They said based on the North Carolina state constitution, the phrase law of the land dates back to the 39th chapter of the Magna Carta, which originally appeared in the North Carolina Declaration of Rights in 1776, that no free man ought to be taken, imprisoned, disseised of his freeholds, liberties, privileges, outlawed, or exiled, or in any manner destroyed or deprived of his life, liberty, or property, but by the law of the land. What does that law of the land mean? They say it goes back to the Magna Carta, which was in the year 1215. The Supreme Court of North Carolina said in another case, they said, "You're referring to the federal Constitution as an analogy." But they say, "We base our decisions exclusively upon the provisions of the North Carolina Constitution." They said, "Due process of law and the law of the land is taken from the Magna Carta," which I read to you in the previous case, came from their original Constitution, or their actual Constitution, in the year 1776. They said in 1715, a statute for the province of Carolina, because North and South were one thing at one time, that the laws of England are the laws of this government. This is the Supreme Court of North Carolina. They said a few days later, at the adoption of the Constitution at Halifax, it was ordained that such parts of the common law, therefore in use, should continue in force. They say it again, that the common law, they said it should be remembered that the common law is to be in full force and effect in this jurisdiction. They said this statute was first enacted in 1715. They say it like, well, nothing changed in North Carolina from the year 1715. They said it should be remembered that this common law, we never got rid of it. They said again in another case. In 1715, all parts of the common law hereto are in force and used within this state. And they said, based on whatever statute they got, the term common law means the common law of England. They said they said in 1711, they enacted a statute saying that the common law shall be enforced in this government. They said this goes back as far as you think it can go. They said there's never been a point in time in North Carolina history where we are not supposed to be doing the common law of England. What's the common law of England in a nutshell? It's due process and it's a trial by jury where the people are the judges, and that the legislator and the judicial branch is not allowed to take away people's life, liberty, or process by writing fake statutes. That's literally what it means. That's, if I had to tell you what the common law of England is, those two things: trial by jury and due process, where you can't write things that take away people's life, liberty, or property, especially before it's gone to the jury. If there's a real injured party, okay, You bring it to the jury, they'll pronounce a verdict, and then you can get the punishment. But you can't be prescribing punishment and taking away people's stuff before a lawful trial has been had. It was one of these states, they said, "Well, if you've had a trial, they took away your stuff, your life, liberty, or property, and it wasn't by the people, it wasn't by the jury, well, then that whole proceeding was void." In 2023, the Supreme Court of North no, I'm wrong. In 2025, the Supreme Court of North Carolina said the English common law had been declared enforced by North Carolina's colonial government, and it remains our law. What's the law of the states, y'all? What's the real law? What's the thing they don't talk about ever? The common law of England. Does that make sense? All right. Well, I'm finna get up off of here. We'll try it again tomorrow. 6:30 Central Time tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Thursday? Yep. 6:30 Central Time. All right. Adios.